Hello everyone and welcome to round 8 of the 2019 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. It's a game between World Chess Champion Magnus Carlsen and Richard Rapport. And for Magnus Carlsen this is an excellent opportunity to take his revenge, as in 2017 edition of the Tata Steel Chess Tournament, Richard Rapport defeated Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces, and it is the only game the two of them have ever played, I believe, in classical time format. I don't know about the Rapids and Blitz. But yeah, so far Rapport has a positive score against Magnus Carlsen, and it is an excellent opportunity for Carlsen to take the lead in the Tata Steel Chess Tournament and also to exact his revenge. Now, I don't believe I was covering that tournament in 2017, but I will put a link to that game, as it's such an amazing game. Rapport really plays an all-out attacking game. Really do check it out. It will be the first thing you see in the description below. But getting back to this game, and it's definitely not the first game we will cover from round 8, but some of them are still being played, and we will talk about a bit more about the standings after that. So Carlsen opens with e4. We have c5, the Sicilian defense, knight to f3, we have e6, the French variation of the Sicilian, d4, c captures, knight captures, and now knight to c6, we go into the Taimanov variation. Knight to c3 and queen to c7, the most very popular Bastrikov variation of the Taimanov. g3 by Carlsen, we have a6, bishop to g2, and now knight to f6. And this has all been played before, the standard theory of the Taimanov. We have castles, d6, and now knight captures on c6. b captures on c6, and now knight to a4. Carlsen did give up this tension that was going on, and he did strengthen Black's center here. As you can see, Black has excellent control of the central squares, but Carlsen will now play c4. He will gain excellent control of c5, and also the knight is very nicely controlling b6. Ideas like bishop to e3 followed by b6 come to mind. So rook to b8, taking hold of the newly acquired semi-open b file, and also adding more protection to the b6 square. c4 as planned, c5, and now comes b3. b3 is a new move in this position. Obviously Carlsen came prepared to fight Rapport. Knight, in all the games that were played in this position, there are but a few, but knight to c3 was the idea. And Carlsen finds a new way to play this position, obviously not b4, but b3, and he decides to keep this knight stranded on the rim for some time. And okay, we have bishop to e7, Rapport prepares the castle, bishop to b2, and now comes castles as planned. And here comes queen to e1. And now you have a lot of ideas here. f4 is an idea. You definitely want to push e5 if Black isn't careful. For example, if he makes a slow move like h6, then e5 will be very strong. Knight has to retreat, then f4 is coming, and White now has this excellent diagonal, and also White can open up the center whenever he wants to and free the bishop on b2. So after queen to e1, you do have to react to this. Also, you do have a very strong dark square bishop. Well, both of your bishops are strong. Ideas like queen to c3 followed by some threats of checkmate will be possible in the future. So Rapport doesn't allow e5, immediately goes knight d7, furthers his control of the e5 square, and now rook to d1. We have bishop to b7, countering Carlsen's very strong bishop on g2, and now queen to c3. As we've mentioned, now of course, Rapport will not blunder something like f5 and queen captures with checkmate. But still, here Carlsen is just testing, how Rapport is feeling. Is he up for a fight? Is he up for whatnot? And also, there's no danger in playing the move, so why not try it? Mikhail Tal often said that you want to give your opponent as many chances to make a mistake as possible. So bishop to f6, defending, attacking the queen. Of course, if the queen moves, then a trade of bishops can occur. Queen to d2, and here Rapport just retreats, bishop e7, and he says, you're the world champion, you have the white pieces, find a different move. And Carlsen repeats it, queen to c3, again, threatens checkmate, and Rapport repeats, bishop to f6, and now queen to d2. Rapport, of course, does not mind drawing again with the black pieces against the world champion, so he repeats, and here Carlsen, if Carlsen would repeat it, then we would have a draw by threefold repetition, and of course Carlsen is not interested in that. We have f4, grabbing more space in the center, and now comes e5. And a very nice move, taking nice control of the d4 square, but also kind of locking down this bishop on b2, so his influence is not felt at the moment. But also it weakens the d5 square. So now Carlsen can use the d5 square for his knight whenever he pleases. We have bishop to c3. Now, with ideas of going bishop to a5 and harassing the black queen. Rapport finds a very nice idea how to deal with this. He plays bishop to c6, and now if the queen is attacked, he's ready to create a queen-bishop battery to counter the bishop on g2, and also to attack the e4 pawn. And Carlsen does go for it. We have bishop to a5, queen to b7, now with a double attack against the e4 pawn, and now finally knight retreats back into the game. But what has Carlsen gained with it? Yes, the knight is now back in the game, and he does have a very nice pawn structure here in the center, but he does have a stranded bishop on a5. But is it really stranded, or is it really controlling the d8 square? So basically Carlsen now gets to control the only open file on the board. So the bishop is very useful on a5. We have e captures on f4, g captures on f4. Carlsen doesn't mind ruining his pawn structure in front of the king a bit, as he can always play king to h1 and let's say rook g1, maybe double rooks on the g file, and create a strong attack against Rapport's king. Rook f to e8, trying to increase pressure against the center. Also bishop to f8 will be an idea in the future, improving the defense of the king side. e5 by Carlsen, now offering a trade of bishops. Bishop captures on g2, queen captures on g2, offering a trade of queens. And here, Rapport decides not to trade queens, but first he decides to grab a pawn in the center. We have d captures on e5, but now Carlsen does not recapture. Carlsen plays knight to d5. And it's a very dangerous idea. Bishop to c7 will be quite a threat. Here, first e4 is played. e4 closing down the queen, because after bishop to c7 that was threatened, you would have to move the rook, and then the queen would be undefended. Then ideas like knight captures with check would open up an attack against the black king. So a lot of threats here. Carlsen now retreats with the bishop to c3, and here already again Carlsen is threatening this queen captures on g7 checkmate, and it is very hard to defend against this. Bishop to f8 is possible, but Rapport goes for f6, and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with this, as it seems to be the best defense. And here is a very interesting moment, because I caught a glimpse of what Sesse's analysis was saying here. Sesse was saying that rook d to e1 is the way to go here. You want to make this rook lift, but Carlsen decides to not play this move. Carlsen first plays king to h1. After f6, king to h1, making room for the rook on g1. And it's interesting, I could be wrong, but I kind of thought that after Carlsen played rook to h1 that Sesse changed the evaluation, and that thought that king to h1 was actually better than Sesse's first move, rook d to e1. I thought that was kind of interesting. But okay, king to h8. Rapport also wants to get rid of his king from the g file. You don't want this knight captures on f6 to be an option for white indefinitely. Rook to g1. We have bishop to f8, increasing now the defense of the g7 pawn, as again Carlsen was threatening checkmate on g7. And now knight to e3. Now Carlsen remaneuvers the knight to f5, where it will pose great danger to the black king. Queen to c6. Rapport now wants to, as quickly as possible, bring the queen over to help out with the defense. Rook to d5. Carlsen decides to go for this very nice rook lift. The rook is now coming to h5, where a lot of nasty ideas will become possible. Queen to e6. We have rook to h5, and now it's hard to say which way to go. Rapport played queen to f7, which seems to be the best idea. If rook e7, then Carlsen has some very nice ideas with queen g6. That's why queen to f6 was better, as it controls here, and now h6 will simply lose to knight d5. You lose the rook here, or if you move the rook, then queen no longer controls g8. Rook captures on h6 check. You either move the king and get queen h7 checkmate, or you capture and then queen g8. Again, will be checkmate. So after rook to h5, queen to f7 was played by Rapport, and now comes queen to h3, threatening rook captures on h7. Not a lot of possibilities here. Rapport decided to go for g6, and Carlsen simply retreated, rook to h4, still leaving black with a lot of threats here, and you do have to take everything into consideration. Will white push f5? Will white play knight here and go for some knight captures on f6 ideas? Will white go knight to d5? So you constantly have to keep aware of all the threats, and it's very hard. For example, if you try to play something like king g8 to get away from the h file and this very nasty diagonal, then rook captures on g6 wins. also very interesting. If pawn captures, then rook checks and queen checkmates on h6 or on h7. And if you don't capture with the pawn, if you capture with the queen, then rook g4 wins the queen. And you do get some material for the queen, but it's not enough. After, or let's say, queen captures, h captures, now you get queen g4, attacks this, also pressures the knight, rook defends, queen e6 check, rook f7, now knight d5, f6 is falling, and black is just falling apart. So after h4, rook h4, we have rook to b6, trying to bring this rook also to help out with the defense. And here Carlsen has a few ways to continue this. He could go knight d5, immediately attack the rook on b6, but there's always time for this. First he decides to go for f5. And what do you do here? Well, you could push g5, but then the rook will just capture it. You will not be able to recapture due to this diagonal. So here, after this pawn to f5, Rapport played knight to e5. And what do you do here? Now Carlsen introduces the knight into the center, knight d5, attacks the rook, rook to d6, and now finally, not rook captures on e4, that's a pawn grabber's move. You know, don't be a pawn grabber, but rather f captures on g6. If you can force matters, always do. We have a knight captures on g6, the knight from e5 is now defending in the g6 square, and here Carlsen has a few options. You could go knight captures, give up your rook temporarily, but then you get knight to d5 with check. This check is now so strong. You have to block it, bishop g7, but now rook captures, and now you have to give up the queen. Queen captures, bishop captures on g7. Now you could capture, let's say, either king captures, then you get queen captures on h4, or you could try moving, but then again, queen captures, and now e3, you try to win this, but it doesn't work. Knight f6 check simply wins everything. You force the king to capture now and go into this fork. Knight captures, and then again, your king and rook are forked, it's all over. After knight captures on g6, Carlsen decided to go for a simpler way. He played bishop captures on f6 with check. Here, rook captures on f6 was played, and it's a very interesting position, because if you play knight captures, then it's not all that easy to win this. For example, knight captures, now you do have rook to g8 check, you win the queen, but after queen captures, knight captures, king captures, and the queen captures on h4, you get e3, and it's actually black who's very close to winning. You have to use extreme trickery to get out of this. Queen g5 check, king h8, and now queen h5. Attack the rook that's undefended, and also guard the e2 square. After the rook moves, now you have to block with the queen, and it's very unlikely that you will be able to win this with white. After this, bishop captures on f6, rook captures. Carlsen did not recapture, but Carlsen played a different move. Feel free to pause the video here and try to find the move Carlsen played. That is the only move that really wins the game. I'll give you a couple of seconds as usual. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are the best. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, bishop captures on h7 was played. After Rapport saw this, he resigned the game. Why did he resign? Well, if you don't capture, then we get the exact same checkmate as we've already seen. The knight is pinned, he cannot capture, and after king moves, now either queen h7 or h6 will be checkmate. On the other hand, after rook captures on h7, if you capture with the queen, let's say, queen captures on h7, then you get queen captures, king captures, and now everything falls apart. Knight captures with check, king has to move, knight captures on e8 with check, and now king f7, knight retreats. And the white is now up the exchange with a much better position, and it doesn't matter that black has this passed e-pawn, because black's position is just lost. For example, knight e5, you get rook f1 check, king to e7, now you get this check, and it's very hard for black to find a useful square. For example, here, knight f6 check, you lose this pawn, and now it's just a lost endgame. Rapport knows this, and after rook captures on h7, Richard Rapport resigned the game. So yeah, a very nice game by World Champion Magnus Carlsen from round 8 of the 2019 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. I do hope you enjoyed it, as we will cover some other games. I believe Anand played a very nice game against Mamedjarov, so we're going to definitely check into that. I would like to thank Sina Darab, Ludwig Mihalik, Richard Furman, Guram Vardiashvili, and Michael Pope for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with some more interesting content. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.